Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished woman leader from India, Swati Bhattacharya. Swati, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Honored to be on it.
Thank you. Swati, in her current avatar, is a storyteller and a marketing communications strategy professional. She's worked earlier for Agilent Technologies, Ingersoll Rand, General Motors, the CK Birla Group, and the Bajaj Group. Swati is passionate about CSR. She is the Honorary Regional Director and CSR and Sustainability Institute. She's the Honorary Regional Director of the and CSR of the Sustainability Institute, CSI. She's the founding member of the Global Women in PR in India, and she's a director of the GP Green Energy Systems Private Limited. Wow, you had quite a very, very impressive career. So Swati, let's first talk about marketing communications. Let's start with saying, what are some of the most common mistakes or errors companies make in marketing communication, and how can these be corrected?
Firstly, thank you, Ashutosh. Now talking about marketing communications, something that I have seen in my experiences, very often there will be many companies that want to communicate about a value or about something that they don't really live in the organization, that leaders and employees don't really identify with, and they don't really understand it. And that I've seen invariably fails because people can see through it. People can see that you don't really mean what you're saying. And I think that that has a worse impact on your reputation than if you were not to communicate about it at all. So very basic thing, I think we should make sure that you're only communicating about values that your organization lives, that your organization stands for. So that is the first thing. And then I think while running a marketing communications campaign, 2 or 3 things that I think have kind of stood out to me while I've been doing it is, we usually try to make the communication very generic because we want to reach more people. And we think that, okay, let me make it a little generic so it makes sense to a lot of people.
Sure.
What I have found is, if your communication is not targeted and personalized, it does not have the impact that you want it to have. So less is more, actually. And, make sure that you are talking to the person or the audience that you have in mind. That's one. Then I think, again, I would say quality over quantity again. Don't send out a lot of communication on something. Send out very targeted, very important communication that is important to your audience. And the third thing, I think, what companies often do is they talk about themselves. We are number one. We do this for you. What I think is more successful is if you did some research and figured out what your pain point, what your customers or your stakeholders' pain points are, and talk about how you make life easy for them, how you solve their problems. I think that is more impactful than talking about what you are. So I would say from my experience, these 3-4 things have stood out over the years that I make sure we take care of now.
Fascinating. And as a Marcom professional, most Marcom professionals work to mitigate the reputation and business loss of corporates. What determines that a company or its management is in crisis?
I would say that any company which either has or has been perceived to have wronged, whether it's customers, its employees, the government, or any other key stakeholder is in crisis. Any event that has really not done well for your reputation, that has kind of put you into a crisis in the market, that is a crisis. It could be anything. It could be misconduct, management misconduct. It could be leadership misconduct. But if you're perceived to be doing the wrong thing, whether you're actually doing it or not, that is a crisis.
Amazing. And for our young viewers and listeners, Can you share any examples or anecdotes with no names, of course?
Sure. So many years ago, I used to work for a fast food brand, and they were hit by the crisis of beef tallow being found in their French fries in the US, and they were being served up as vegetarian fare. So when this news hit, it became a very big deal globally. And of course, in India, you can imagine how sensitive people are. So it became, I mean, people started coming to restaurants, they started breaking restaurants, they started beating up the people in the restaurants. So it became a really huge crisis, not only just from the business point of view, but from the safety of the employees' point of view. However, it was not true in India. In India, actually, they had separate vegetarian, non-vegetarian counters. They had separate people working in these counters because they knew how sensitive India is about things like vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and it is a religious issue more than anything. So it was then up to us to really communicate in a convincing way to kind of convince these people that this was not right. So firstly, of course, first thing to do is talk to the media, tell them your point of view, tell them your part of the story, because they have to be on your side. They have to understand and listen. So we brought the media to the restaurants. We took them into the kitchens. We showed them how we did things. We took them on a familiarization trip to our suppliers' factories, to the farms. So showed them the whole chain and, showed them how we treat vegetarian food. Did that. Secondly, we told a government lab that please come pick up fries from any restaurant of your choice at random in any part of the country and test them in your lab. So they did that. And of course, they did not find any beef in the product. So then we really used that to really drive awareness about that. We advertised, we did a lot of PR, we sent it to customers. We even in the restaurants, we made a big deal about that. The other thing was opening the kitchens to the customers also to say, come and see how we, treat your food in the kitchens. Come and see how we cook it. So did that. That was very successful because, you believe what you see. So as the customers walked into the kitchen, they saw how things were being prepared. They saw how everything was being done. That helped. And then this was a multi-pronged approach because we also then started talking to doctors, lawyers, like key professionals, people who have some impact in the society. We started inviting them to the restaurant. And we said, come with your families, look at how we do things, have a meal with us. And, more and more as we started doing this, word of mouth is very important. PR and advertising is something, but word of mouth, if your doctor tells you that, I did go to McDonald's and it's fine, so you will believe it much more. So we continued this campaign for years, actually, even after the campaign, even after the crisis had passed. But once we'd done this, the crisis, I think, petered out very quickly in India compared to the other countries. And I think in a matter of a couple of months, we were back to doing business as normal. So that was a very interesting experience of crisis that I could talk about.
Fascinating. And I think most of our viewers and listeners will probably be able to relate with which organization this happened in. But,
yes.
But moving on, when I was in the corporate world, one of the things that we used to be told is that, and in those days, there used to be press releases and press conferences. And I'm talking of, the 90s, the 80s and the 90s. One of the things that we used to be taught was that you release good news on a Monday and bad news on a Friday.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get your perspective that in the world of social media, where everything moves at lightning speed, how do organizations manage marketing communications?
So yes, we've lived with that thing for a very long time, especially if it's business news, because the business community is more receptive to business news on a weekday rather than a weekend. And weekend was a time for features and softer stories and all of that. So we've lived with that for a long time. We've always tried that if there is a business story, it should not hit on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday. It should. So yes, but completely, that's what I was also going to tell you, that things have completely changed now. And if it's bad news, it doesn't matter whether what time of the day or night or which day it is. It is immediately going to blow up, and you have to have your crisis plan in place, no matter what time or day it is. So those rules don't apply anymore. As far as PR is concerned or newspapers are concerned, I know PR teams still try to do that because good news does not blow up as much as bad news does.
True.
So when you're sending out good news, you're trying to do everything to make sure that it reaches your key audience. So for good news, I would say that we still try to do that. But yeah, of course, you're right. I mean, it doesn't make sense if it's bad news. I mean, you've just had it then.
Correct. And as a Marcom leader, how do you manage the constant communication happening on social media?
You have to be on your toes. I mean, that has all changed. So, earlier, I think we used to talk about 8 hours being a good time to reply to emails, or, if you return a call in 2 hours. We used to have these things. Now it's within minutes, within seconds. Especially if somebody is complaining about your product or complaining about, your service, the longer you take to reply, it puts you in, they're guilty, and the quicker you reply. And I think it's very important to be very transparent, to be very authentic when you're doing this, because I think the more transparent and authentic you are, the more believable you are. So there is no time limit anymore. I mean, even in our companies, we say, if we could have, we would like to keep somebody through the night, because in global organizations, you have global issues. But I mean, the response time now has to be less than 5 minutes for you to be effective.
Amazing.
So completely.
How the world has changed.
Yes, totally.
Swati, let's now move on to the next segment of our conversation, which is on CSR and sustainability.
Yes.
You are very passionate about CSR. Tell me about some of the work that you have been doing.
So, when I'll tell you, when I started working with Agilent Technologies, CSR became a part of my mandate. And, as an organization, you try to make sure that the societies you work in, that the people you work in, you're doing whatever it is to give back to that society. So started doing a lot of interesting projects there. Because it was a technology company, we focused a lot on STEM, educating the girl child, making sure that women are being, diversity was also a very important thing. So women are being given the education, are being given the training that they need to make something out of their lives. So education, children, I've worked with some fantastic NGOs, over the last few years in the areas of education, in the areas of women empowerment, also making sure that when the child comes to school, they're getting a full meal, because that becomes the biggest issue of why a child wants to come to school. You drop out otherwise. So taking care of that as well, to make sure that a child is fed, a child is clothed and educated. So it has to be a 360-degree kind of approach, because a lot of organizations say, we'll take care of computers for the school, or we'll take care of blackboards, or whatever it is, or painting the school. But, that is very narrow. So if you don't look at a problem in a 360-degree kind of an approach, where while you have computers, does the child have enough to eat? But does the child, is the child clothed well enough? And is he comfortable in school? So we've looked at a lot of that, and then as I moved from Agilent to Ingersoll Rand to General Motors, CSR has really been a very key part of my role. And always in the areas of education, mostly in the areas of education, women empowerment, women training. So that is, that kind of keeps me going. I think it has made a big impact on my life, to see the difference that very ordinary people like you and me can make to a large issue that a country is faced with.
Fascinating. And let's talk about ESG now. Last few years, the Indian corporate sector has really taken to ESG in a big way. Share with me some of your experiences on how ESG is being implemented in some of the companies you have worked for.
Yeah, honestly, it took a very long time, but I think now corporates are completely on board with ESG. Earlier, it was more optics, but now they've realized that in order to be sustainable, in order to have a long-term business growth, they have to be on board with
Correct.
ESG, right? Um, while there is also this scrutiny from regulators, from investors, I think what really drives it is consumer interest in ESG. Consumers nowadays are so aware. They don't want to have anything to do with a company that is not following ESG norms.
Correct.
So I think there is a lot more action on that front. And companies have realized that to create any shareholder value, you have to start making, strong commitments to achieving net zero. And those then have to be integrated in the business goals. Earlier, it was like, oh, we will be net zero, but how will you be net zero was a question that not many people were talking about.
Correct.
But now we're talking more and more about manufacturing, production. What are we going to do? How we're moving to green technologies. When we started, it was more about energy efficiency, but now we are moving to, more than energy efficiency. How do you become net zero? So I mean, even in the companies that I worked for, I've seen a real lot of interest on how do we change the production? How do we change manufacturing? How do we change the products that we use? They're looking at supply chains of suppliers. Are the suppliers ESG? Are they following ESG mandates or not? Not doing business with companies that are not following ESG business norms, because that brings us down as well. So I've seen a lot of interest, a lot of focus on ESG, and that's great actually, because we really need to now get on board and do something about it. So
correct. And my next question, you just mentioned that the consumer is becoming very, very aware of whether an organization is following ESG. I'd love to get your perspective on how the millennials and the Gen Zs beginning to impact how companies are communicating, and how are they becoming more sustainable and socially responsible?
Yeah, I mean, there have been umpteen studies and research to say that millennials and Gen Z are really, really focused on sustainable investing, and many studies now call Gen Z the sustainability generation because they're so focused on sustainability. And millennials, they actually represent the largest population in the workforce today.
Correct.
So, and since they are making the investments, they're completely in the driver's seat to talk about, who to invest in and who not to invest in. So that's become a huge leap from where we were, I think, even 10 years ago. With ESG investing, companies that are not focused on ESG are completely losing out, because they're not creating shareholder value. They are not, they're just going to actually go out of business if they don't do it. So, the millennials and the Gen Z, I'm sure with your experience and, with my experience with my children and their friends, they are really, really focused on sustainability.
Amazing.
And they've really put a lot of pressure on companies who still were trying to do the optics, etc., that they do their research, they go into details. So it's not like you can, you can get away with just pretending to be sustainable. So that is the really big change that I see that has happened in the last few years with, the whole focus on sustainability from the millennials and the Gen Z. I mean, my children won't let me buy something without them researching what the company is doing otherwise. So I can imagine, what it must be.
Absolutely. Well said. So Swati, I have time for one or two more questions, and I want to talk to you on diversity.
Okay.
As a senior woman leader in the corporate sector, and you made it right to the top, I want to get your perspective on how much is really happening in the corporate world on inclusion, on gender diversity, or is it still lip service? I mean, I still sometimes get a call from someone to say, can you recommend a name for a board, because we have to comply with laws? And I said, the people I know will never agree to join you because you have to comply.
Because you're saying that, yes.
Correct. So I'd love to get your perspective.
Totally. and again, it has been proven time and again that women have better EQ, they make better leaders. If you have women on your board and your leadership team, your bottom lines are better, you are more profitable, you have better workplace practices. So that discussion is over. We know that, yes,
Absolutely.
it is.
I agree.
It is absolutely very important to have women in your workplace, right? And in senior positions. However, in most societies, the brunt of home making or home care comes on the women as well, right? And whether you have a career or not, you may be a working woman, but you still have to look after your home. It's not like you can kind of give that to somebody else, but it's still your core responsibility. So I think what a lot of good companies have now realized is that they have to handhold women. While even in India, that situation is much better now. I mean, a lot of companies are really trying to do that, effectively. But while they're hiring, there is a lot of focus on diversity. People are, mandating that you hire women. And while they're hiring more women, I think what happens is that at an entry level, you have a lot of women, but by the time the women reach, middle management, the whole brunt of childbearing and the whole brunt of homemaking comes on them. And that is when they need that support.
Correct.
That is when they need that hand-holding, because they can't get out of it. I mean, it's pointless to say, I will work like a man and I will continue to do what I need to do. And a lot of companies have realized that giving women the flexibility then, giving them, hand-holding them, giving them a good mentor, finding them sponsors within the organization, that works. While I agree with you, it's more optics right now for a lot of companies, but the big ones, the ones that really have done good work, they've evolved beyond optics. And a lot of companies that I've worked for, I think they are really looking at how to retain women, how to give them that extra support, especially during those middle years, when they're bearing children, when they're looking after their children, etc. So, and that is having its impact. That is, if you now invest in those women, they will later on make sure that they pay you back for that investment. Absolutely. By really making you more profitable, making you a great place to work at. So I agree, there needs to be more real interest in women rather than optics. And I think we're getting there. It takes a little bit of a while, but I think we're getting
very
there.
Well said. Very well said. Swati, on that note, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for talking at such length on marketing communications and some of your fantastic experiences in various organizations. Thank you for talking to me about CSR and ESG and diversity. And I'm so glad we are ending this on a high where you're saying that organizations are beginning to now recognize the need to support a lot of women in their middle years. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you, Ashutosh, and good luck to you too. Thank you so much for having me on this.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.